Lian Li's latest budget PC case is compact and it comes with some interesting features, including a unique power supply position and some smart airflow ideas. It supports ATX motherboards, large graphics cards and 360mm radiators with dimensions close to micro ATX form factor. Add all this together and on paper at least, the Lancool 207 could be the best budget gaming case of 2024. So let's see if that's all true with some real world testing. So this is Lian Li's latest budget or cost-effective PC case. It's the Lancool 207. It's got micro ATX dimensions almost, but it supports full ATX features. It's available in both black and white colour schemes. The black one has an MSRP of $79 and the white version has a slight premium at around $85. In the UK you can pre-order the case now from Overclockers UK, but at the time of filming this video price was still to be confirmed. Lancool 207 is a compact mid-tower ATX case with MATX dimensions that can accommodate top-mounted 360mm radiators, ATX motherboards and graphics cards up to 375mm long. It features a new front power supply mounting position, front panel 140mm ARGB fans and 220mm PWM bottom mounted fans for optimal cooling, as well as large mesh panels at the front, top and bottom of the case to improve ventilation. The unique power supply position means that the connector ports face outwards for easy cable connecting, and the dedicated cable routing channels and straps make cable management efficient and tidy. So let's take a closer look at the case. There's quite a bit to go through, even though it is, you could say, a basic budget type case, but it has some really interesting features that we want to take a look at. First, on the front I/O, you have two USB 3.0 Type A ports, a single USB 3.1 Type C port, a combined 3.5mm audio jack, and a power button. Front panel connectivity is along the top edge of the case, so perhaps this isn't the best case to have on your desk at the side of you to access those front ports, not like a 011 dynamic where you can move it to a different position. It is fixed in that top panel. Maybe it's better to have this case lower down for easy access to those top ports. Removing all the side panels is very simple. So we'll start with the glass, just pushes out from the back there and then lifts out. It has a slight tint to that maybe, but it is very mild, so you should be able to see into the case reasonably well with the side panel on. Front panel is also tool free. Just push it out from the top like that and it lifts out. There's a couple of magnets that hold it at the top and it kind of hooks in at the bottom there, and it is a full mesh panel. There's no additional dust filter behind this, so this acts as a front mesh panel for airflow and a dust filter. Top panel's much of the same. That just pushes off from the back. It's just held in place with some of these pins into these plastic clips. You do get some of those plastic clips in the accessories pack, so whether Lian Li is expecting them to maybe fail if you remove the top panel frequently, I'm not sure, but you do get a few in the accessories pack. You tend to get that with Lian Li cases anyway that use these quick release side panels. The 011 dynamic and a few other cases do come with those, so it's not anything out of the ordinary to have extra ones in the accessories pack. At the bottom of the power supply shroud, there's another panel here that's separate to the glass side panel. There's a couple of thumb screws that hold this in place. It's very similar to the previous Lian Li Lancool 216. It had this split glass and mesh panel. Remove those two thumb screws that are captive, and then that panel slides backwards, and again you can see it's another ultrafine mesh style panel that will act as a dust filter, because there will be some airflow being drawn in here. We'll take a look at that shortly. And then the other side panel on the right hand side, again, it's just a quick release side panel. It pulls off very easily, very quickly. It's just a plain steel side panel. There's no sound dampening material or insulation or anything on that. The panel's pretty rigid. It does have some flex to it, which is to be expected. And there's also, you can see at the bottom there, there's another vent there with some ultra fine style mesh for airflow. The case comes with some fans pre-installed in the front panel. It's two 140mm ARGB fans, 30mm thick, and they have a speed range of 450 to 1900 RPM. The high airflow fans, so they're designed for airflow. And this front panel is only designed for 140mm fans. There's no 120mm fan mount on that front panel. It's not really designed for radiators because Lian Li expects a radiator to be installed at the top, and front radiators may encroach on the space for graphics cards. It's probably not necessary during installation at all to remove the plastic part of this front panel, but it is just clipped in place. So if for any reason you do need to remove it, it can be quite easily pulled out. But as I say, it's not really necessary to remove that for installation. At the bottom here is the only dust filter in the system. It's the nylon type dust filter on a plastic frame, and you'll see shortly where that dust filter filtrates dust from. It's inside this main compartment where all the interesting stuff is going on. With that power supply front panel or shroud removed, that mesh grill, the layout here is quite different to what we're used to in an ATX case. So at the front, Lian Li has moved the power supply there, so it screws in here, and there's an extension cable included like you get on the A3 M-ATX. That plugs into your power supply, and then it extends the cable to the back of the case there, where you'll be able to plug in your mains power. So because that's been moved to the front, the power supply, what that does is it creates more space at this side of this compartment for the motherboard to be lowered. That will create extra room at the top of the case for thick radiator and fan installation. In this top mount here, you can see the space there for up to a 360mm radiator. Only caveat with that is it's a maximum of 70mm thickness. You can also install in here 280 or 240mm radiators. A 280 is allowed a maximum thickness of 60mm. Potentially you could also fit in there either 3 120 or 2 140mm fans. You notice as well as the motherboard tray being lowered to allow for more space at the top, it's also recessed back from this front section, and that allows the installation of 140mm fans and radiators without encroaching onto the motherboard space and causing any major conflicts with motherboard components. Motherboard support includes up to ATX size, so there's no eATX motherboard support, but up to ATX, so that includes ATX, micro ATX, and mini ITX motherboards. Below the motherboard tray is another very interesting area of the case. So where would be normally the power supply shroud area, we now have this tray that holds two 120mm fans. So these 120mm fans, they come included with the case, and the difference between this and a case that has the power supply at the back under the shroud, the fans here have completely unrestricted airflow. Often in cases, one of these fans will be partially blocked by a power supply, but with this it's completely unrestricted. There's airflow from the left hand side, the right hand side, from the rear, so potentially those fans can draw in airflow from all angles and direct airflow to the GPU cooler. They're the main interesting features that we want to talk about with this case: the fans on the floor and the arrangement of the motherboard tray. It also supports a 120mm rear fan to be installed, and because the motherboard tray is recessed backwards, the case is quite narrow, but it still supports CPU air coolers up to 167mm tall. Maximum graphics card size in the Lancool 207 is up to 375mm, which is good for the majority of high-end graphics cards on the market. You'll also notice at this side here, there's a GPU anti-sag bracket that can just be raised or lowered to the correct position for your graphics card. And depending on how long your graphics card is, there's 3 different spaces that you can locate that. You'll notice that there isn't any support for back connect motherboards, so there's no cutouts for motherboards like MSI Project Zero and Asus BTF. But with this motherboard layout and how close it is to the right-hand side panel, you wouldn't be able to fit a back connect motherboard in here and connect up the connections. If you look at back connect supported cases, they have quite a deep recess in the right hand side, which this doesn't have. You'll also notice that there isn't many cable cutout grommets on here. They're just cutouts. There's plenty of cutouts for routing cables through, but they have no rubber grommets on any of them, except for this one, which is an alternate 24-pin cable cutout.
As a world-leading manufacturer, CyberPower PC UK expertly builds each PC with the largest range of parts available in the UK. We handle all your packages with care and ship them directly to you on next day delivery. Visit cyberpowersystem.co.uk.
At the back of the case, it's pretty similar to other ATX and micro ATX cases. There's a large vented area, 120mm fan support, cut out for the rear motherboard I/O, and then there's 7 horizontal PCIe slots. The case does support vertical mounting. You can actually use the O11D Evo vertical mount accessory in this case. It is compatible with that, so potentially you can vertically mount graphics cards in here. The only difference between a regular ATX case and this is there isn't a cutout at the back for the power supply. There's just the connection there to plug in the mains cable. And then switching it around to this right hand side, you can see the motherboard tray that's recessed. There's probably only at most a 10mm gap between the motherboard tray and the right hand side panel. No need for it to be any bigger in this because all the cable routing will come out from the power supply here and up this main cable routing channel here along the top to EPS and the top fan connections. So there's really no reason why that will be a problem, the motherboard tray being so close to the side panel. You can see you've got a few Velcro straps up here as well for neatening and tidying up cables, and there's a couple of guides there for the top cable routing. Potentially you can strap those on with some zip ties or Velcro straps if you need to also. So if you think about how this is going to look with the power supply in there, the power supply connectors will be facing outwards, so out towards this right hand side panel. So not only will that make cable management potentially easier running straight up and across, it will also make connecting cables to the power supply when the system's installed. It'll make that a lot easier than when you have the power supply at the back with the connectors facing towards the front of the case. So it does look like there's been some really clever thoughts and some clever design that's gone into this case. You can see there's no fan hub in this case or any ARGB hub or any ARGB controllers. Everything just connects directly to motherboard headers. So the fans are PWM fans with standard 4-pin PWM motherboard headers, and the RGB fans at the front, they are just standard 3-pin 5V ARGB headers. Other thing in this side really is the 2 storage brackets or the storage drive mounts on the floor. These are both held in with thumb screws, and a good thing which I did wonder about with this was how tight these screws are going to be. They are loose enough to just take off with your fingers, so it would be actually difficult to get a screwdriver in there. So there's been thought put into things like that too. These remove really easily, so just undo the thumb screw and the brackets come out. On here you can install either a 2.5 or 3.5 inch hard drive, and there's actually 2 of these mounts. So you can install either 2 3.5 or 2 2.5 inch drives or 1 of each. There isn't much going on the floor of the case other than some plastic feet that are probably about 20mm tall, and on here there's some anti-vibration rubbers on each foot, and there's also a vent at the front here for the power supply fan. The only accessories that come with the Lancool 207 are this user guide which gives you some helpful installation tips, and this box of installation hardware that includes assorted screws, side panel clips, hard drive rubber mounts, zip ties and Velcro straps. So for the test system build, I've used an AMD Ryzen 7 7800X 3D. Motherboard is a Gigabyte B650E Aorus Pro X USB 4. Graphics card is a Gigabyte RX 7900 XT Gaming OC. For memory, it's 32 GB, so 2 16 GB modules of Corsair Dominator Platinum. It's DDR5 5600 megatransfers per second. CPU cooler is the MSI Mag CoreLiquid i360, so it's a 360mm all-in-one CPU cooler installed in the roof of the case because that's the only place you can install a radiator or an AIO in the case. Power in the system is a Seasonic Focus GX1000 ATX3. It's an ATX3 and PCIe 5 ready power supply, 80 plus gold rated and fully modular. And for storage, it's just a 1TB NP700 PCIe Gen 5 M.2 NVMe SSD drive from Corsair. The other fans in the system are just the stock case fans, so the 2 140s at the front and the 2 120s on the bottom of the case. Graphics cards mounted horizontally. I didn't use the vertical mount. I prefer the horizontal mounting with the airflow coming from the bottom of the case. In terms of the build process, it was really easy and straightforward building this. There's just one thing to mention that I'll come back to in a minute. But first, let's look at the thermal performance of the Lancool 207. It's our usual thermal performance test. If you want to see the full testing methodology, head over to kitguru.net. There will be a written page for the Lancool 207 over there. All the testing methodology is in the written page. And it's the usual 3D Mark, Speedway and Cinebench R23 combined 30-minute stress test. Running the case in various configurations had little effect on the CPU temperature due to how the Zen 4 CPU frequency is adjusted based on a target core temperature. But it's GPU temperature which is the one to look at in this test. However, the CPU temperature is as we would expect, so there's no worries about poor CPU thermals with the Lancool 207. In the default configuration, or with the glass side off or front mesh panels removed, there is little change in the GPU temperature. But disabling the bottom mounted fans had the only significant effect on GPU temperature, increasing by 4 degrees C. So compared with other cases that we have tested using this graphics card, the Lancool 207 keeps the GPU core temperature approximately 6 or 7 degrees cooler, which isn't huge, but it's a worthwhile improvement. So I really highly rate this case. The only issue I had during the installation, I mean, everything went together really well. The alignment of all the motherboard standoffs, the rear PCIe cutouts and the fan screw positions, everything like that, all perfect. Nothing wrong with those at all. The only minor issue I had during the installation, and really nitpicking here, is the USB 3 header on the motherboard. Connecting that was quite tight with one of the bottom cable management clips or brackets. I had to just remove the bracket to plug in the USB 3 cable to the bottom corner of the motherboard. It's right down here, and then screw it back in place after. It was a little awkward, and it means that the cable on the USB 3 front panel connector is quite severely bent to miss the actual bracket on the back of the case. Maybe a good idea for Lian Li would be to put some extra screw holes in there so you can choose the positioning of that bracket depending on what you have connected to the motherboard. But other than that, there's very little to complain about with this case. The build quality of it is excellent. I like the small dimensions and small footprint, makes this almost around the same size as a traditional micro ATX case, but still supporting ATX motherboards, big graphics cards and big CPU coolers. It comes with 4 fans, 2 of those are 140mm ARGB fans. Easy, simple connections straight to motherboard headers and controlled by the BIOS for the fan speed and the motherboard software for the ARGB lighting effects. They seem like good fans, they've got good airflow, and if you tune your fan curves, you will have them running quietly. The system's running now and it's virtually silent with those fans running at about 700 RPM for the fronts and around 900 RPM for the 120s on the floor. As you've seen, the thermal performance is excellent. Both CPU and GPU in our tests ran at optimal temperature, and at just $80 or £75 in the UK with the 4 fans included, it seems like excellent value for money. It's possibly the best budget case to launch this year. The only minor things with it is you have just the single radiator mount. There's nothing up front for mounting radiators. It's not really a problem. I don't think the engineers at Lian Li had custom cooling in mind with that. I think it was always designed just for a single radiator installation. The only other really minor things, and again really nitpicky, there's no cable grommets on the majority of the cable cutouts. But one thing I would have liked to have seen, a top radiator mount that was removable. Just makes it easier if you want to connect anything to the top of the motherboard or disconnect anything while the system has been built up. And the only other thing I can think of is there's a lack of dust filters in the system. That's probably not a problem on the mesh panels because they will act as a dust filter, but at the back here, this also is working as an intake and it has no air filter in, so potentially could be a lot of dust pulled in through that back panel, but that's something that only we'll be able to tell in time using the system. But overall, it's a really great budget case, good thermals, good build quality, easy to install a system in. The removable tool-free panels are great for easy access into the case, so all round it's a really great budget gaming PC case. So that's the Lian Li Lancool 207. Let me know what you think of this case in the comment section. If you've enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. If you enjoy what we do here at KitGuru and you want to help support us, you can always head over to our store and pick up some merch, or you could even subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.